And breaking tonight, terror investigations underway in the capitals of two U.S. allies. In France, a man rammed his car into a police vehicle on the famous Champs-Élysées in Paris. The attacker was killed. The police were not injured, but they feel they stopped him from doing something horrific. And in the United Kingdom, a suspect plowed his van into a crowd of people leaving late-night services at a London mosque. At least 10 people were injured. The driver was arrested, and the British Prime Minister Theresa May is calling this terrorism. Ahmed Rehab is the National Strategic Communications Director for the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Zuhdi, I want to start with you. You say that Europe is now into its second decade of ignoring its biggest problem. What do you mean?
Well, they've had droves of immigrants that have not been really assimilated into understanding what it means to be European or British or American. And bottom line is that this lack of confrontation of Islamism, theocratic Islam, if you will, and allowing these ideologies to brew has now brought exactly what ISIS wants. The reason they commit acts of terror in London, in Paris, in San Bernardino is they want to start a spark so that there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as a response, that opposite reaction of hyper-nationalism, bigotry, racial supremacism is exactly what ISIS wants. So as long as the West continues to deny, because of using Muslims as a minority, as a grievance group, as long as we deny that Islam is in that time in history in which it's confronting theocracy in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, and Syria, and we can do the work for reform here in the West that they just can't do in the Middle East, the West has been enabling us to prevent the reforms we need, and the reaction from the hyper-nationalists has been now feeding into the ISIS narrative.
So the idea, this was a 47-year-old man from Wales who drove this van into this group of worshipers who were leaving that mosque. Ahmed, so what Zuhdi is saying is that this is all part of the plan to sort of incite this kind of chaos between people and to pit them against each other and create these situations, that's the goal of what ISIS wants.
I agree with Zuhdi on that particular point, that ISIS does want ultimately to divide and to put a wedge between Muslims and non-Muslims. I don't know if that's what he's saying, but that's my belief. Yes, in the West in particular, in Europe, in the United States, but in the world at large. And I think, however, that where we part ways, myself and your guest, Zuhdi Jasser, is that I believe by linking ISIS to Islam proper, or to immigrants, or waves of immigrants and refugees, as he just did, plays right into that and allows someone like this man who drove his van into these groups of essentially immigrants or native-born Muslims or refugees, whatever general group of Muslims they were, to make that link in his mind that he is acting against ISIS because somehow all Muslims are complicit for what ISIS does, or all Muslims bear some responsibility for ISIS, which is obviously a criminal outfit.
This is where this conversation often goes, Zuhdi, that the problem is that this has been blamed on all Muslims, and that's what incited a man like this to do what he did. What do you say?
Well, I say that, Martha, the hypocrisy is that many in the left and in the Islamists come together and want to blame rhetoric and want to blame political ideology on individuals like this nativist, this hyper-nationalist, racial supremacist. And yet when it comes to global theopolitical jihadism, they don't want to make any connection between non-violent Islamic State ideology in Saudi Arabia, Iran, and many imams and clerics that are in London, that are in America, that want to say they condemn terror, but they're anti-Semitic and misogynist and have other ideas that are not compatible with the West.
All right, Ahmed, go ahead.
Why would this man drive his van into British Muslims who are worshiping in their mosque?
Because he's playing into exactly what the Islamists want.
Because he has bought into what Zuhdi is saying. He has bought into the notion.
He bought into what Zuhdi is saying, or he bought into... Go ahead.
Well, what Zuhdi is furthering is the notion that Muslims at large bear some responsibility.
I never heard him say that once.
For the criminal groups. Well, deny that, Zuhdi, would you?
So Ahmed, listen. I will tell you that the nativist hyper-nationalist does feed some of this militant response, but you also have to acknowledge that there's. Listen, you have to acknowledge, and you can't take Americans for fools, that the global jihadist movement has nothing to do with all of these acts of terror. There's such a deep rank in hypocrisy.
Every time. What you're trying to do is to link ISIS, which is an extremist terroristic group, to Muslims at large, which is a global
But
thing.
isn't that, hold on one second, before we run out of time. Ahmed, but I believe what he's saying is that is exactly what ISIS wants. ISIS wants it to be directed at all Muslims. But thinking people understand that is not the case. This man acted in a very violent way, which is absolutely wrong. That's why it's being treated as a terrorist attack.
Right.
But you can't allow them to be successful in doing that. Zuhdi?
So the way you
there are a few examples.
All right, Zuhdi, very quickly, and then Ahmed, very quickly, guys. I got to wrap it up. Go ahead.
Ahmed, there are a few examples of militants like this guy, but the proportionality of global jihadism, which you continue to deny a link of the nonviolent ideology of Islamism to the militant reactions that we have to protect our country from, and you are avoiding the leadership necessary to acknowledge, yes, there may be a link with this guy's ideology and his actions, just as we have to link jihadism with militant jihadism.
Not too long ago, just, people who are watching can DVR back. You started off by saying the increase in immigrants are part of the problem of ISIS. You cannot make that link. You cannot talk about immigration.
Not all immigrants, the Islamists, the 20 to 30% of Islamists that are theocrats are the problem.
Have to pick it up next time. Thank you very much to you both.